welcome back to Saturdays Out West, an edition of the Jack Power Show. And last time we really focused on the Pac-12 conference, what was going on, just kind of going through the quick recent history of the Pac-12. We talked about Texas State, how they'll probably be a wild card this season. Just a lot of interesting topics, coaching changes, of course. But in this episode, I really want to focus on previewing each team one by one, going through all 8 of the teams this year in the Pac-12 conference for football and breaking them down, kind of what will be the tough parts of the season, what will be the easy parts of the season, kind of what we should expect from each team. I'm not going to get into win-loss totals. I'm going to save that for a future episode. But just kind of breaking down the previous year under maybe a different coach, who they lost, who they gained in the transfer portal. So some interesting topics to be had. And I want to get into it just right away. I think it would only be right if we started with Washington State and Oregon State. So we'll start with Washington State first. And the changes they went through during the offseason and during last season, 2025. So last season they were coached by Jimmy Rogers. And Jimmy Rogers came in from South Dakota State, brought a lot of players with him, a great resume for himself as well from South Dakota State. He went 7-6 with Wazzu, and he had a lot of struggles with Washington State. At the start of the year, I think a lot of Washington State fans expected probably Zevi Eckhouse to be the starting quarterback during the season, and instead they went with a guy named Jackson Potter. And no hate to Jackson Potter. Potter was a solid quarterback, but I think it was a bit of a surprise, especially after Zevi Eckhouse had played in the 2024 Holiday Bowl after John Mateer left for Oklahoma and showed a lot of great signs. So it was just interesting to see. And with Jackson Potter, they kind of showed struggles. They had a close win versus Idaho, which it's a rivalry game, but you're playing at home, and it's a team you should probably beat by more. And then they bounced back, of course, with a solid win against San Diego State, kind of a future Pac-12 game at the time. But then they hit the road and played North Texas, and of course North Texas was amazing last year. Get just whooped. And then they have to go back home, and then they have to play Washington in the Apple Cup. And so they had just recently given up 59 points. Now they're making a quarterback change to Zevi Eckhouse. And they got lit up again. Washington dropped another 59 points against them. And you started to really worry about this defense. But all of a sudden, after that Apple Cup, things changed for them. At this point, they're 2-2. Then they go and play Colorado State on the road, and they dominate in that game 20-3. But then they have to play Ole Miss and Virginia in back-to-back games, 2 ranked games. Ole Miss ended up finishing ranked 4th in country. All know how that turned out for Ole Miss on the season. And they only lost by 3 points on the road, 24-21. And then they have to stay on the road, go play Virginia, who was also ranked. They lose 22-20, and they basically lose on a safety that Washington State gave up. Wazzu was winning for a majority of that game. I think a lot of Wazzu fans expected the Cougars to upset Virginia. So it was just a frustrating year. You had a lot of close games. You got blown out in a lot of games. You didn't really know what to expect. They played JMU as well. They lost to JMU on the road, 24-20, a playoff team. So you look at the teams they played and lost to, and you have to think, okay, they were right there. Well, here comes Jimmy Rogers, and he makes a quick exit to Iowa State, and with that, he's going to take almost half the roster with him, at least what it felt like, to Iowa State along with him. So Jimmy Rogers, only 1 year as head coach of Wazzu, showed signs of greatness, showed signs of weaknesses, interesting play calls down the final moments of games where you thought, okay, Washington State really has a chance to play an upset here against some big teams. Again, Ole Miss and Virginia, and then even JMU at the time would have been an upset. They finished the year winning the Idaho Potato Bowl against a future Pac-12 matchup in Utah State, 34-21. But you didn't really know now what to expect going into this year. You didn't know who the head coach would be, and then they hire Kirby Moore. We've talked about Kirby Moore on the last episode a lot. Again, he spent 3 seasons as the offensive coordinator at Missouri, averaged 31.2 points per game there, and 418 yards per game on the offensive side. His rushing on the ground, 234 yards per game, that was 8th best in the FBS. I don't really need to reiterate it too much. Very talented team he had, very talented offensive scheme he had. Kirby Moore brings in a lot of experience on the offensive side of the ball, especially after last season where you kind of, as a Washington State fan, didn't really, I want to say, you weren't pleased with the offensive performance of this team, especially after you've seen the Mike Leach era of the air raid offense. Washington State fans are so used to that. And everything kind of changed with Jimmy Rogers, who wanted to be more on the ground, attack more on the ground, be more physical on the ground. And it worked at times and it didn't work at other times. So hard to say. So Kirby Moore, he does kind of bring in more of that rushing scheme, but he's going to bring back that offensive game plan as well in the air. But when you look at the season, on top of that, Kirby Moore, he's also going to bring in Trent Bray. Trent Bray, of course, was fired from Oregon State last year, but is so experienced. Before he was head coach at Oregon State, keep this in mind, before he was head coach, this was when he was the defensive coordinator of the Beavers. He only gave up to opponents 20.3 points per game in the 2022 season. That's less than 3 touchdowns a game. Offenses against Trent Bray's defense only averaged 260 yards of total offense per game. And in 2023, he continued that success as defensive coordinator. His last season as DC there gave up 22.2 points per game, 298 total yards per game. So Trent Bray knows how to be very, very successful on the defensive end. Those were just the 2 years he was defensive coordinator there. And those were the only 2 years he was defensive coordinator there before being head coach. So you have to think he's going to keep that going. Of course, when he became head coach, that defense really struggled. The offense struggled. But I think that just maybe wasn't Trent Bray's thing. He wasn't ready maybe to be a head coach. And he's looking to prove things again on the defensive end of the ball with Washington State. And now he can let Kirby Moore, as head coach, kind of let him do his offense. And now Trent Bray can take that back seat and feel a lot better. He just has to manage less players, less parts of the game. And I think he'll be very successful with Washington State in that aspect. So those are your coaching changes. Now let's get into who they brought in. They bring in quarterback Caden Pinnock from UC Davis. At UC Davis, Pinnock threw for 3,200 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions he gave up. So there's promise in him. Now they also have a freshman, Owen Eshelman, out of high school, that has shown hope in camp. And then you also have Julian Duggar. And Julian Duggar is more of a rushing quarterback. I'm not sure Julian Duggar will necessarily start. After the scrimmage they recently had, the comments we're hearing from the camp, from the scrimmage, is that the quarterbacks showed signs of greatness, but they also showed signs of weaknesses. So there's still a decision to be made. By the time the season starts, I'd be kind of shocked if Pinnock isn't given the nod. But it is possible, I think, that Owen Eshelman maybe has a shot. I just don't know how much Kirby Moore wants to go with the true freshman at quarterback in year one. And keep in mind, game one will be the Apple Cup. Do you want a freshman in that situation? I'm not sure. They also have a basically revamped wide receiver. They keep Tony Freeman. Tony Freeman was excellent in his time with Washington State so far. Last year had 590 reception yards. And then their transfers they bring in, Tank Hawkins, he's a junior from Florida. And Tank Hawkins didn't have a lot of playing time at Florida, so he's looking for more playing time with Washington State. They also bring in Darius Clemens, who transferred from Oregon State. He's going to be in his senior year. And then they bring in Daniel Blood, who followed Kirby Moore from Missouri, who is also probably looking for more play time, had 5 receptions for 51 yards last season with Mizzou. So he's in his senior year. The offensive line for Washington State features a lot of returners, not a lot to worry about there, and probably allows, if Pinnock is the quarterback, to move around a lot more, and Pinnock likes to maybe move on the ground a bit as well. And they have a returning running back room in Kirby Voorhees, Leo Pulasi, and it makes you feel confident in the offensive pieces on the squad. Now on the defense, they lost a lot of pieces, like I said, to Iowa State with Jimmy Rogers' exit, lots of new pieces. There's really only 3 to 4 projected returning starters for the Washington State defense. But you have to imagine that means position battles will be competitive for the Cougars. That means they're going to fight pretty hard for that starting spot. And it's not that they're just getting young guys. It's some pretty experienced transfers coming in as well. There's a couple returners, but like I said, everything's about team chemistry, I think, on the defensive end. You think about mid-game adjustments they have to make on the fly. Being experienced just in this Trent Bray defensive scheme style. A lot of question marks on the defensive end. Do I think they'll be successful? Yes, just because of Trent Bray. They have to make sure they're a tight-knit group, though. That will be number one for the Wazzu defense going into this season. So the best thing about Washington State, their offense has a chance to be great. Biggest concern, though, I would say right now is the defense. I wanted to say the quarterback, but I think with Kirby Moore and the way he focuses on the rushing game a little bit more will allow that quarterback situation to not be as relied on as it typically would be in, say, a Mike Leach air raid offense. And then I'd love to preview a little bit of the Wazoo schedule going into 2026. And it's not easy. This is their non-conference slate. Starting on the road for the Apple Cup against Washington. They stay on the road, play Kansas State. They come home, get a little, you could say, easy win of a game against Duquesne, and then they stay at home against Arizona. Not easy. Not easy. That's 3 P4 teams right there, 2 Big 12, 1 Big 10. And then you have to stay at home against Fresno State to start Pac-12 play. That's a tough stretch. So the toughest game, this is what I want to do. I want to name the toughest game, most important game, a trap game, toughest stretch, easiest stretch. 5 things. And I kind of categorized the toughest and most important game for Washington State into one. And that's the Apple Cup. Kirby Moore is going to feel the pressure in that game. It's Kirby Moore's first game as a head coach. It's against the rival, and you're playing on a Sunday. All eyes will be on Washington and Washington State in the Apple Cup that Sunday, September 6th, on NBC. It's the hardest game you have all year, more than likely, and it's the most important game. Not from a fan base perspective, but also for Kirby Moore, and also for what the expectations of this team probably should be. I think the spread right now is 20.5. I think they could keep it closer than that, but Washington is going to be a good team this year. They're probably going to pick up 8 to 9 wins. I think there's so much to prove in that game. Now, a trap game for Washington State. I'm going to give that game to Texas State. You have to play on the road. It's your final conference game before the flex game. Before that, you get Colorado State at home. So you have to travel mid-November all the way to Texas, play them in San Marcos, and if your season's in a good spot, you're feeling good maybe after a win against Colorado State at home, and you have to play an elite offense in Texas State, I could see that being a really tough time for the Cougars. Their toughest stretch, it is that non-conference play. And if not that, it would be the Boise State and then San Diego State games back-to-back. But I'm going to go with the non-conference slate. That non-conference slate is in the top 10 hardest non-conference schedules for any team in all of the FBS this year. That Duquesne game helps it become a little bit lighter, but keep in mind, not just the non-conference. This flows into Pac-12 play where you have to play Fresno State. Granted, it's at home, but Fresno State, they're not a walkover game. Their easiest stretch, I believe, will come against, following that Fresno State game, against Utah State and Oregon State. They're both on the road, so it's not just a cakewalk. There's not really any part of the schedule I would say that's a cakewalk, nor for any Pac-12 team. But those are the games you need to get back, especially if you come out of non-conference play 1 and 3 with only a win against Duquesne. Those are 2 games you have to get back. But it has to be their easiest stretch. So that's all I have on Washington State. We'll get in again to win totals, my projections, predictions of how I think things will play out on the season in a later episode. So, like I said, I think it's only right, though, to continue things on with the former Pac-2 teams, and we're going to get to Oregon State. A lot of questions on Oregon State as they go into this year. They were 2-10 last year. They started 0-7. Trent Bray was the head coach, as we talked about just a ton with Washington State. He was fired. 0-7 start. But it was a tough 7 games. I don't want people thinking that Oregon State played easy teams and they just couldn't win. No, they started against Cal. I have it here, Fresno State, on the road against Texas Tech, who was ranked. And then they had to play Oregon on the road. Then Houston. And then on the road against App State. I mean, come on. You can't look at Oregon State and say they should have won really any of those games. And then to finish it off with 7 straight losses, Wake Forest. Keep in mind who coaches Wake Forest. Jake Dicker, former Washington State head coach before Jimmy Rogers, who coached John Mateer and had Ben Arbuckle as his OC, who's now the OC at Oklahoma. Oregon State did not have it easy last year when it came to the schedule. Their first win was against Lafayette, and then they ended actually beating Washington State 10-7 at home. Washington State will get that back later in the final game of the year because they played twice last year. But, I mean, geez, it wasn't easy. Does that make it okay to start 0-7? No. But it's an excuse you could have. But here, coaching changes. So, of course, they went with an interim to finish off the season. They had some closer fights, especially against Sam Houston. Washington State they won against. It got a little out of hand again as they finished up against Tulsa and Washington State on the road. But new hire, Jamarcus Shepard, we talked about him last episode, brings in a ton of his experience, spent time with Alabama under Kalen DeBoer, wide receivers coach, co-OC at Purdue for 3 years, tons of experience. But this is his first year as a head coach. And he's going to be working with, I'd say, a pretty good offense coming into year one. He's keeping Malik Murphy as the quarterback. You have Cornell Hatcher Jr. As your starting running back, more than likely, who sat under Hankerson last year. And Cornell Hatcher Jr., he was not bad at all. He's a solid running back that the Pac-12 will have to keep an eye out for. Lots of different spots, though, at the wide receiver position. Most importantly is Xavier Noland. Xavier Noland is a great addition to the receiver corps. He comes in from Texas Rio Grande Valley. Finished 4th in the FBS in yards per reception with an average of 22 yards per reception. I mean, talk about a deep threat. So Xavier Noland is a huge addition to the Beavers offense. I think that they're going to be looking at a lot of tough games this season, but and keep in mind, Jamarcus Shepard, wide receiver coach, he knows how to work with receivers and help them be talented, especially at Alabama. I mean, think about the receivers coming out of Bama. So, a lot to look forward for him on the offensive end. And for the most part, the defensive guys are coming back. There's probably 3 or 4 guys that will be different on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm not saying that it's the same starters. They lost a lot of guys in the portal. They lost 54 players in the portal last season to some pretty big-time programs. But you have a bunch of guys who will start this year that were in the Oregon State squad last year who are looking to start now. And they saw what happened last year. You have to imagine they have a chip on their shoulder after having to sit through that on the bench. Best thing to look forward to with Oregon State, though, this year, I think the wide receiver talent and the potential to be great on the offensive side of the ball. The potential, I say. I'm not saying it will be great, but you have Malik Murphy returning at the quarterback position. Has he proven himself? I wouldn't say fully. I think there's a lot to prove for Murphy. But the wide receiver core is there, the line's there, everything you could want is there. The biggest concern for me, though, looking at the Beavers squad this season, would be, can they actually put that together? Can they be successful? Can they score on a consistent basis? And can your defense hold up? There's just so many new faces, so many new guys on the team from both players and the coaching standpoint. Will they do it in year one? I'm not completely sure. That will remain to be seen, but a lot of question marks for them. But I think let's get into their 2026 season. And they don't have it easy either. Talk about game one. What you guys will notice is every Pac-12 team this year, week one, has a tough game. And it's shown right here for Oregon State. They are on the road against Houston game one. That will be on ESPN, in fact. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. They follow that up with Texas Tech at home. At home. It's not easy to play at Oregon State, but at home. So let's go over their toughest game, and I think it's right there, Texas Tech. Toughest game. Texas Tech is going to have one of the most elite defenses in the country this year. That'll be a really tough game for the Oregon State offense, especially if they can't put that offense together. Their most important game, I'm going to say game one, Houston. Same thing as I said for Kirby Moore. It's game one of the year. You have everything to prove. Can you put up a fight? Can you put up a fight? Trap game. I have their fourth game of the year at UTEP. It's their final non-conference game. And it's not like the three before are easy. It's not like a Duquesne game for Washington State after two tough games on the road. For Oregon State, that third game of the year before that UTEP game on the road is Montana. Montana. That is not an easy FCS team to play. So you got to play Houston, Texas Tech, Montana, and then in your final game on the road will be UTEP of non-conference play. And then after that game, you're preparing for your first Pac-12 game on the road again against Colorado State. That UTEP game, it's scary. I wouldn't like that being the final non-conference game for them after a tough first three. Now, their toughest stretch, it's kind of similar to Wazzu. I'm going to say it again. The non-conference is their toughest stretch of the year. It's a proving ground. Can you keep the games close? A lot of P4 teams within there. Your FCS opponent is not the easiest in Montana. That's a tough stretch. It's a tough stretch going into Pac-12 play. Their easiest stretch? Nothing. They don't have anything easy. It's going to be a grind for this team. I mean, you look at the rest of their schedule. San Diego State, Washington State back-to-back with Fresno State to follow, with Texas State to follow that, and then on the road at Boise State. Your easiest game's Utah State at home. Would not want Oregon State's schedule this year. For a team who's trying to put up more than 2 wins this year, that's tough. It's going to be a grind, but Jamarcus Shepard, he's going to have these guys in check. So there's Washington State and Oregon State. Since I already kind of talked about this team in the prior episode as the wildcard team in Texas State, let's talk about how their season was last year. Let's get into the Texas State preview right now. Last year they go 7-6, same record as Washington State. At one point, though, they had a 5-game losing streak in Sun Belt Conference play. Arkansas State, Troy, Marshall, JMU, and Louisiana. And during that time, the defense really struggled to keep the offense in the game. Arkansas State, they gave up 31. Troy, they gave up 48 in overtime. Marshall, they gave up 40 points in double OT. James Madison, 52. Louisiana, 42. My goodness. That is bad. That is a lot of points. Hey, hammer the over. They were kind of a wild card team, I'd say, too, in the Sun Belt last year. As I said, they're the wild card team to me this year in the Pac-12. And that's basically because, as I mentioned in the last video, most of that offense returns this season with G.J. Kinney and Landon Keppel in his third season as OC. They both return. The change they made is they bring in a new defensive coordinator, and much needed as well. I mean, you look at last season, and that's unacceptable. They bring in Will Wyndham from South Alabama who's looking to revamp this Texas State defense. But I'm not super confident in Will Windham, and I'll tell you why. Last season, Will Windham was the defensive coordinator at South Alabama. Now, you tell me if you think he will get the Texas State defense in check. 21 points given up against Morgan State game 1. Pretty good. Okay, let's go play Tulane. Gave up 33. Auburn gave up 31. That's Auburn. That's not bad. Coastal Carolina following that, 38. Then 36 against North Texas. Good offense in North Texas. At Troy in overtime, 31. Here's a good game for Windham. Arkansas State gave up 15. They still lost, though. 15-14, South Alabama did. 31 against Georgia State, they won that game. Louisiana gave up 31. Louisiana Monroe, 26. Southern Mississippi, 35 against Southern Mississippi. They won 42-35. And then against Texas State last year, they gave up 49. It's not the worst thing you've ever seen in the world, and it's not like that 5-game stretch that Texas State had last year. But does it give me confidence that Texas State will be successful on the defensive end of the ball? I don't know. I don't know. Let's talk about Texas State. Players they have returning, players they have leaving. I talked about Texas State a lot last video, so I'm going to kind of skim over it. But Brad Jackson returns at quarterback, 3,200 passing yards last year, 21 touchdowns, elite quarterback. I look forward to watching him play in the Pac-12 this year. They lose, though, Greg Burrow, who was supposed to be their starting running back. He was dismissed from the team after he was arrested. So they're going to be relying on a guy named Torrance Burgess Jr. He returns from a season-ending injury he suffered last year. They also have Jalen Jenkins. So the running backs are there. They've had the running backs. I'm not too worried about the dismissible Burrow. At wide receiver, though, Bo Sparks, 1,200 reception yards last year. Bo Sparks is going to be a problem in the Pac-12. Maybe the best wide receiver in the Pac-12 this year. The defense, as I mentioned, it was a problem. Their offense, top 25 in the FBS last year. So it remains to be seen, though, what the defense will do under Windham. They do get a fifth-year returner with the new 5-for-5 rule in Traylon Payne at linebacker, recorded 107 tackles last year. They will probably need to rely on him, again, heavily this year if he continue that pace. Again, I'd say the opponents Texas State are playing this year are better than that of the Sun Belt. And that's not even crazy to say. It just is. The Sun Belt is not as hard as this Pac-12 conference is. Did they have it easy last year? No. But it's not going to be easy this year, and I'd say it's harder this year. And that defense will need to be there against elite offenses, I think, of Boise State, possibly San Diego State with Lucky Sutton at their running back. There's a lot of question marks on Texas State. Best thing about Texas State, though, it's plain and simple. Their offense, worst thing, biggest concern, defense. Super simple. I'm not going to stay on that too long. I don't think I need to reiterate it. Let's look at Texas State's 2026 season. Another Pac-12 opening week tough game for Texas State on the road against Texas on a Saturday at noon. That's their toughest game of the year, game 1, week 1. I mean, geez, just look at this week 1 trend for the Pac-12. Playing tough opponents. Texas State's most important game to me, it's going to be at San Diego State week 5. That's on October 3rd. First game in the Pac-12 for Texas State. It's a prove you belong game, I think, for Texas State. Your offense in Texas State is going to be playing probably a solid defense in San Diego State. And will your defense hold up on the road against a San Diego State that not is necessarily the greatest offense in the world, but it's an offense that is looking to be a lot better this year under Sean Lewis? It'll be an interesting game for them. Their trap game, I would say it's at Oregon State. And I say that because they play Boise State on the road prior to that. So that makes it back-to-back weeks for Texas State on the road, far from home. Spider-Man. That's just tough. You got to play Boise State, who's probably the team to chase more than likely in the Pac-12 this year. and then you got to respond quickly and stay on the road. And then when you come home after that, you got to play Fresno State. So if you're Texas State, you're kind of almost, you're trying not to, but you're almost thinking ahead to that Fresno State game after you just have to play Boise State, and that game's not going to be easy either. So that's why I want to say that's their toughest stretch as well. Texas State, you got to play Boise State, Oregon State, Fresno State, then Washington State. That's your final 4 games before even the flex game. That's a tough stretch. Their easiest stretch, it's going to be after that San Diego State game that opens up Pac-12 play for them, at Colorado State and at home against Colorado State, and then at home against Utah State. Those should be games I think Texas State should win. And that's all I really have to say about them. I mean, there's a lot of question marks on Texas State, and that's why I have them as the wild card team this year, and I think rightfully so. There's no other team that has the biggest question mark on it this season than I think Texas State. It's just, I trust the offense so much with the Wildcats. I just cannot trust the defense. Let's get into the final team of part 1. The first 4 teams I'm going to preview and ending it here with Boise State. And Boise State, do they have a lot to look forward to entering the Pac-12 this year after they went 9-5 and won the Mountain West Championship last year, lost in the Los Angeles Bowl to Washington 38-10. They looked very great and elite at times, and other times they were very worrisome, but they did suffer a lot of injuries during the season. And 2 of those losses were against Fresno State and San Diego State in back-to-back weeks, where they had a lot of injuries. I was there at the San Diego State game where I watched Boise State lose. And funny enough, it was raining in San Diego for that game pretty heavily, I think, during the 3rd quarter. Just a tough game all around for them on the road. Maddox Madsen was not the quarterback in that game. So just a tough game. It was Cutforth, that quarterback who led the team in passing yards, 104 yards in that game. Cutforth also started that game against Fresno State at home that they lost 30-7. Just tough games back-to-back against teams that were healthy while you were unhealthy. Not any coaching changes for them necessarily. Spencer Danielson still leading the way. One of the few coaches going into, I believe, the 3rd year now with Boise State, similar to Sean Lewis with SDSU. So he has some experience with the team he's been with compared to a lot of the coaches who are either in their 1st year as a head coach or 1st year with a new team. So that's good for Spencer Danielson. The offense kind of basically returns. They lost some really good pieces that I'll talk about here in a sec, but they're keeping Maddox Madsen, who's entering his redshirt senior year. He's probably the most experienced quarterback in the Pac-12 when you just look at it just straight up. They have Dylan Riley returning, who rushed for over 1,000 yards last season, and that's after he had to replace Genty. I'd look for him to do the same this year. Another 1,000-yard rushing year, I strongly expect for Dylan Riley. And Maddox Madsen as well to have a really excellent year. On the defensive end, they lost some pieces. They lost that safety Ty Benefield to LSU. The wide receiver they lost on the offensive end was Chris Marshall to Arkansas. Those were probably their biggest losses from the portal. But they added guys, and they also got the returning preseason All-American edge rusher this year, Jaden Virgin Morgan, who returns as a redshirt senior. He picked up 6 sacks last season and forced 2 fumbles. He will be a problem for opposing offenses, straight up. So you have a lot of great pieces on the defensive end. Your offense is basically all there. A couple new receivers, a couple experienced receivers with the Broncos. All right, so after all that, what is the best thing about Boise State this year? Number one, they have a lot of veteran experience at the positions that probably matter the most in the game of football. I mean, you look at the quarterback, the running back, the edge rushers. It looks super solid all around. Maddox Madsen gives Boise probably one of the most proven quarterbacks in the new Pac-12. In his entirety with Boise, dropping pens now. In his entirety with Boise State, in 26 career starts, he's 20-6, 6,500 passing yards, 50 career touchdown passes. What more could you ask for if you're Boise State looking to go and win the Pac-12 in year 1 of this new era? And then their biggest concern would be, making sure Maddox has that support cast. There's a couple new safeties coming in, a couple returners, so different receivers to work with. I'm not concerned about the defense. I think it'll be just fine. Some new pieces at O-line. So just how does everything work together? I'm not really concerned about it. I'm just saying if I did have a big concern, it'd be with Boise State in that aspect. But Boise State overall, their concern level is pretty minimum compared to other concerns I have with a lot of Pac-12 teams outside of them. Now, let's look at the season they had ahead of them in 2026, and we continue on with the Week 1 tough game for Boise State, theirs being against number 2 Oregon. I mean, on the road, 12:30 on CBS. They put up a really, really good fight with Ashton Genty in 2024. Can they do it again with a more experienced Maddox Matson? Very, very possible. It's very possible, and I think they probably have one of the best chances to go and play a huge upset in Week 1. Granted, Oregon's going to be very, very talented and very, very good next year. They'll be very, very good going into this season. Tough game, though. Tough game. And I also kind of going to do the same thing with Washington State, where it's their toughest game and probably their most important game. How close can you keep that game? If you can keep it close, the committee is going to be looking at you very strongly. If you can keep that within one, I'd say even maybe 2 touchdowns. It just makes me think that if they can keep that close, they're going to have a great shot against every other team they face in non-conference play. Memphis, South Dakota, at Western Michigan. That's a tough game. And it's a game I kind of at first was like, oh, Western Michigan, that is their trap game. Final non-conference game before going in the Pac-12 play. But again, you're playing in a South Dakota before at the FCS level, before you play Western Michigan. It's kind of like you're going to build on a lot of things as a team. That road game, it's tough. Western Michigan isn't a hand-me-win, but you have Utah State after that game. So it's not like they're going to be focusing on a game prior or after that Western Michigan game. It's going to be probably all eyes on that Western Michigan game, which makes me feel a lot more confident in that game. So I am going to go with Colorado State as their trap game on the schedule. Right after you play Fresno State, Washington State, then Texas State. And then you have to go on the road and play Colorado State. That is not an easy game to play at Colorado State. It'll probably be packed, especially if Boise State can get ranked by then, which I think could be very, very possible. So that's probably their trap game. And I wouldn't say they necessarily have one. Their schedule is, I'd say, on the favorable end of things. And that gets me to their toughest stretch. And I would say it's that Fresno State, Washington State on the road, and then back at home against Texas State. Fresno State on the road is going to be tough. Fresno State will probably be a really good team in the Pac-12 this year. Washington State's not just an easy win. You're going to go on the road to Washington State. I'll say this, it's not a far travel. A lot of Boise State fans will probably be in attendance at that game in Pullman. But it'll be hard. It'll be hard. And then you have to come home and play Texas State. You don't have to travel very far from Pullman. I wouldn't even consider a real road game. I just think Texas State's not the easiest offense to play against. Your defense better be ready for that. And that's really all I got to say. That if they have a tough stretch, that's their tough stretch. Their easiest stretch is probably when it starts on that non-conference game against South Dakota after the conclusion of the Memphis week. And then you go South Dakota, Western Michigan, Utah State. If you can handle Western Michigan, that's the biggest game in that 3-game stretch. You can easily come out of that stretch 3-0. But yeah, those are the first 4 teams of the Pac-12 conference I'll be previewing. Again, we talked about Boise State. That's the team I think everybody's chasing right now. Washington State, Oregon State, your former Pac-2, and then you throw Texas State in there as possibly the wild card this year. But much more to come in Part 2, dropping later this week, where we'll preview San Diego State and Fresno State, along with Colorado State and Utah State, who will be 2 interesting teams to talk about there at the end and see how maybe their seasons progress and what they're capable of with maybe not as great of rosters as we've just talked about in Boise State and Texas State's offense. And then you look at Washington State's offensive possibilities, but their defensive possibilities as well with Trent Bray. and the Oregon State, and just being tough-witted, with Jamarcus Shepard leading the charge with a lot of great players on the offensive side of the ball for them. So a lot to look forward to, and then after that conclusion of that part 2 video of the Final Four Pac-12 conference teams we'll be talking about, and then I'll start giving you my win-loss totals, predictions on the season, what to expect, and then we'll start going week by week and previewing these teams on a week-by-week basis of their matchups. Talk about the outcomes of games. It'll be a super fun year. And again, thank you all for tuning in to Saturdays Out West, an edition of the Jack Powers Show. I'm Jack Powers. We'll see you on the next one. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to know your thoughts as well on those 4 Pac-12 teams and what you'd like me to talk about with the other 4 Pac-12 teams we'll be talking about later on. All right, see you guys on the next one.